So earlier this summer, in what should be an ongoing series exploring Joe Biden's various tics, we looked into his habit of whispering kind of out of nowhere and kind of psychoanalyzed that from a bunch of different directions. And I'd actually be curious, Kim and Alyssa, both for your takes on the whispering that we did this back when Emily Jashinsky was guest hosting, and she had some interesting takes on that. The tic that we want to explore today is sort of the kind of looking through the fourth wall thing that Joe Biden does, where he will, actually, let's just play a couple of the examples right here.
He gave me a list here. The first person I was instructed to call on was Kelly O'Donnell of NBC.
I'm not supposed to take any questions, but go ahead.
Mr. President, on Afghanistan.
I'm not going to answer Afghanistan now.
Can you say if there's still an acute risk?
And so what Biden does here, he's kind of tells people, you know, what kind of screen guidance he was given behind the scenes.
He says the quiet parts out loud. He's not supposed to say that, right?
Right. And so every president, when they give these press conferences, they'll say, like, they have a list of people, but it's rare that the president will say, I have a list of people and I'm going to read from it. They're, okay, you can always see like Obama, like looking down and saying, oh, Steve from the AP. But to say it out loud is one thing. But the even more interesting, I think, is Biden's willingness to say, "Oh, I was told not to say that," or I was told not to go there," and it to me it rhymes a little bit with the way in debates he would stumble over himself when he'd be about halfway through a sentence and then he'd say to himself, "Nope, not going to go there."
I think this really confirms, I think this confirms the belief that many of us have, or the suspicion that many of us have, that Biden is just like a puppet president, just being propped up by the Democratic establishment, being told what to say. And when he says these types of things on camera in front of everybody saying, oh, I was instructed not to take any questions, like, you're the president of the United States of America. You are supposed to be the leader of the free world. Nobody is supposed to be telling you what to do. So when he says, oh, I was instructed not to take any questions, or, oh, I've been told a list of who I need to be taking questions from, because it's been, for one, that has other issues with it. Like, oh, so you're not going to take hard questions from journalists that might actually challenge you. You've instead been instructed to take questions from those that are going to give you softballs. Like, what kind of ice cream did you eat yesterday?
Steve Ducey always seems to make that list. So.
Well, they put one in there, right? But this definitely just kind of, I think, reiterates the suspicion that many of us have, that Biden is just being told what to say, what to do. And a lot of the decision making that's happening makes us wonder how much he's really involved.
Well, and it's funny to me. So for viewers who don't know, I was Donald Trump's final communications director at the White House for the last 6 months. And I worked for a principal who didn't take a lot of instruction. So before he'd go out and do press conferences, it is standard. You would go through a chart that has the pictures, the outlets, and what reporters are in the press pool that day, and say, this is probably what they're going to ask. This is probably, and it's not cheating. That's the way it's done. You talk to the reporters before, you get a sense of what they're doing. And oftentimes I would say, I think today's not a good day to take questions if I knew we were having a really bad news story. And every single time he would take an hour of questions. So, I worked for a president that didn't have, he just made up his own mind about what he was going to do. It's a very interesting juxtaposition to see Biden actually listening to staff on these things and deciding, he's been told don't say anything, so he's not going to. But again, it's kind of saying the quiet part out loud. You don't want the principal to go out and say, oh yeah, no, I was told not to take any questions today. You're sort of acknowledging we're having a really bad day and I do not have good answers for you.
For one, I don't think they should be. I think they should be. I don't know how we'd go about doing this, but they should be required to answer questions. We, the American people, deserve to know. They work for us. We pay them. And they need to be answering questions, even on those hard days, especially on those hard days. They should be answering those questions.
Well, and one thing I've been struck by with this is President Biden doesn't seem to know who a lot of the members of the press are. Of course, he gets in back and forth with Peter Ducey, but by the time I was even early on serving in the Trump administration, they know who the big reporters are because they're talking to them so frequently. But for him to not, to have to read off of a list who Kelly O'Donnell is, that's just kind of surprising to me. And it shows, I think, kind of a lack of transparency that he's not regularly engaging the press for. And when he is, it's in this very structured way that his staff has told him to do.
Or he just can't remember.
Yeah, there's that too.
But I think there's also a political agenda, or there's like a political tactic at work here. And I can't exactly put my finger on it, but from Biden's perspective, and Biden, say what you want about him. He's been in office since he was 28 years old, been in the Senate since he was 30. And he's a political animal. He's been doing this for 50 years. So he's got fine-tuned kind of political skills. Sometimes they send him off in the wrong direction, but he's constantly thinking in terms of politics. Like, how is this going to make me look? And in particular, how's it going to make me look down to the working class voters down in Southern Delaware? That was kind of his lodestar. He made sure that he could lock down the black vote in Wilmington, and he did a very good job. That remained popular for 50 years there. And then he wanted to do quite well down in the southern part of the state. And so everything that he was doing was guided by that political sensibility. So why is he like, what is he trying to communicate when he's saying out loud that his staff is suggesting that he not say X thing? Like, to me, partly it's he's sort of trying to claim the mantle of like a bad boy. Like he's been told to do this thing, and he's going to let you know that he's been told to do this thing, but he's going to kind of bend the rule a little bit.
Well, if he's being a bad boy, then he needs to work on his demeanor a little bit for that. Right. If he's trying to be a bad boy, you just
but that right. I'm not
Joe
saying
Biden.
He's not pulling it off, but I feel like he does try to give off that aura of the prankster in the class who's not exactly following the teacher's.
I think you're too kind.
Instructions.
He just looks like he doesn't remember.
But is that kind? Is that kind? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a little. That's a little.
No,
kind.
I respectfully, he's lost some speed on his fastball or whatever. Don't want to mess with my baseball metaphors, but he's not, I hate to say, he's not as sharp as the Joe Biden of 10 years ago or even 8 years ago.
For sure. Yeah. He always had this elliptical speech that was that his colleagues would make fun of. And now that he's lost some zip on his fastball, it's harder for him to complete those ellipses. Like they trip over themselves and they get tangled up and knotted over each other, and he just gives up on the paragraph.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, Kim, what do you make of the whispering?
I mean, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. He does all the, I just don't think that his mind, I'm just in the camp of, I just don't think his mind is totally there. So I think he's doing a lot of things, he's like remembering or reminding himself. He's saying things obviously out loud he's not supposed to say. There's just a lot. I think that I feel really bad for him. I'm not going to lie. I do, I think it's unfortunate. And I have people in my own life who are slipping mentally, especially as they get older. And I'm sure it'll happen to me, hopefully not. Hopefully we have some advancements in medicine, but, probably a sitting duck for something similar. But, I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, listen, it introduces an important conversation about not term limits, but age limits. People do, men, women, both alike. We do lose some of our sharpness as we get older, and we should have a conversation at some point about that.
And it's a tricky, what he's trying to pull off with the whispering thing is tricky. And when you're losing some zip on your fastball, it's harder to pull off. I do think it's pretty clear that the whispering thing comes when he's saying something that is both obvious, but is not supposed to be said out loud, like in Washington, D.C. And so like an example would be like, look, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan, something like that. Like you're not, like, it's obvious. Yeah, of course we do. I can do the math. We did spend 20 years in Afghanistan, but you're also like in polite conversation, you're not supposed to say that because that implies that it's a forever war. It's a total failure. And that what on earth do you want 20 more years? And so if you look at when he does his whispering thing, it's always in those moments where he's saying something that he thinks is like both an obvious, but a truth that nobody wants to hear in Washington. And so he whispers it, but he doesn't nail the execution. And if you don't stick the landing on something like a whisper, it's going to just come off weird.
Well, that's right. And that's why to me, it looks like he's really just kind of buying time to gather his thoughts a little bit. And that's why I kind of attribute a lot of his quirks to mental decline, unfortunately.
And with that, we will have more rising next.